may well be the greatest team ever assembled in the history of team sports.
I don't think the Dream Team could match the 2008 Redeem Team athleticism.
Half of those guys were a little past their prime.
The 92 Dream Team, Larry Bird was shot. He retired 10 days after the Olympics. Guys on that team, multiple, who could not handle the ball and who couldn't shoot.
At one point, it was universally accepted that this was the greatest team ever. It would never be topped. Of course, we must accept that times change. Records are meant to be broken. One thing can't stay the greatest forever. But that doesn't apply here. What people say to discredit this near flawless team is completely baseless. One of their claims is that they had a huge hole in their roster. Magic Johnson and Larry Bird were not the same players they were before. Magic was forced to retire the previous year due to his HIV diagnosis, and Larry Bird played his last NBA game a few months prior. If they were to use them in the starting five against any of the Olympic teams from the Redeem Team and onward, they would get exposed. Well, that would be true if Larry and Magic started every game, but they didn't. The only player that started every game was Michael Jordan. Chuck Daly made the decision to rotate 8 different players in the starting lineup. With the amount of talent on the team, he had the luxury of switching everything up every game. Chuck Daly was more than capable of making the proper adjustments depending on their opponent. Yes, it's true that Magic and Larry were selected to be on this team in part due to their contributions to the game. They were two of the most important figures of the sport. They put the NBA on the map. Then Michael Jordan took it to a whole other level. It would be a crime if the world didn't see those 3 players on the court at the same time. There's no question this caused an impact to the future generation of players that weren't born in the US. And let's be honest, there was a lot more room for error in the 1992 Olympics. The competition was nowhere near the level that Team USA was on. You could get the fans what they wanted to see without losing your 40-point lead. If there was more on the line, Larry Bird would surely understand why they wouldn't be playing him as much. We're talking about someone who had the least amount of ego from any of the all-time great players. Did you know that he was placed on the bench in the middle of the 1981/82 season? If you didn't, that's because he didn't give a single complaint or make a huge deal about it. He simply complied. There's no reason to believe he wouldn't do the same if they faced a proper challenge. Since they didn't, people don't know how to judge this team properly. How would they perform against a team with the same level of talent? They would do just fine because there is much more to this team than their big 3. This is unquestionably the greatest collection of players that we've ever seen in a 12-man roster, and is not even close. How do we know this? I'm going to rattle off 10 players who are easily top 50 players of all time. Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, David Robinson, John Stockton, Scottie Pippen, Clyde Drexler, and Patrick Ewing. On any respectable top 50 list, you're going to find all these players deep among the all-time greats. Now here's another important factor. Aside from Magic and Bird, no one was over the age of 30 when the Olympics started. Here are the ages of all 12 players. Look at all those players who are between the ages of 26 and 30. Isn't that the sweet spot? They're not too young, where their inexperience would be a factor, and they're not too old, where they wouldn't be able to keep up with the younger talent. Usually, a player hits their peak between the ages of 27 and 30. Over half of this team's roster is right at their peak. That makes them even more dangerous. Take for example Charles Barkley. Did you know that he was a leading scorer for the Dream Team? He was extremely efficient because no one was physically capable of stopping him. You were too worried trying to stop everyone else, and he took advantage. A few months later, he had the most memorable season of his career. He won the MVP, and he helped lead the Phoenix Suns to one of the greatest seasons from a team that didn't win the title. As great as he was, for some people, he's not even a better power forward than Karl Malone. In the 1991/92 season, he finished second in scoring. he averaged over 28 points and 11 rebounds for the third straight year. Only Will Chamberlain, Kareem, Elgin Baylor, Giannis, Bob McAdoo, and Bob Pettit have been able to average those numbers over 3 consecutive seasons. Then there was his running mate, John Stockton. He quietly had one of the greatest statistical seasons from a point guard in '92. He averaged 15.8 points, 13.7 assists, and 3 steals per game. Of course, he led the league in assists and steals. But that's not all. That is currently the 5th highest assists per game and the 7th highest steals per game average for a single season. That was a player who was coming off the bench for the Dream Team. It's no wonder the Jazz were able to reach the conference finals. But who did they lose to? Clyde Drexler and the Portland Trail Blazers. He was coming off the best season of his career. He finished runner-up in the MVP race and led the Blazers to the finals. Did you know that he led the team in points, assists, and steals? He was arguably the best all-around player in the game, and that surely gave the Dream Team a lot of flexibility. Speaking of flexibility, what about Scottie Pippen? For those who question his individual greatness, the way he performed among all these legendary players proves how immensely talented he was. With his experience playing with MJ, he knew how to fill the holes better than anyone. What allowed him to raise his level of play was his underrated athleticism. It came to the point where the Mavericks coach that year called him the closest thing to Michael Jordan. He was the Dream Team's biggest X factor. But believe it or not, Chris Mullin was a close second for that title. Like many other players mentioned, he was coming off his greatest season. He averaged over 25 points per game for the 4th straight year, and he led the Warriors to a 55-win season. To give an idea of how people viewed his talents, he finished 6th in MVP voting in '92. That's where he landed among all these greats. His biggest contribution would surely be his shooting, and he couldn't miss that summer. The dude averaged 62% from the field and 54% from the 3 for the Olympics. But their biggest strength would surely be their front line. They had 2 of the greatest power forwards of all time, and they were absolutely loaded in the 5 spot. David Robinson was in his athletic prime and was a monster on both ends of the floor. For this season, he won the Defensive Player of the Year award. He averaged 4.5 blocks per game. That was not only the most in the league, but it's the 7th highest average for a single season. On top of that, he averaged 2.3 steals per game. That's only the 2nd time in league history that players average over 4 blocks and 2 steals per game. It is not an exaggeration to say that he had one of the greatest defensive seasons by a big man. If that's not enough, Patrick Ewing was his replacement. He averaged 3 blocks per game and was the anchor of the 2nd highest rated defensive team in the league. The Dream Team had plenty of capable scorers, so these 2 players would contribute so much on the defensive end. There is no Olympic team that would be able to contend with all these legendary big men. Last but not least, come on. You have the greatest player of all time at the peak of his power. With the championship experience that he gained, he became an even more dangerous player. For many people, this is the greatest version of Michael Jordan. He was the epitome of athletic greatness, where athleticism meant the pinnacle of skill. When you combine that with the intangibles and his incredibly high IQ of the game, you can make the case that we've never seen anything better. When you combine that with this already stacked team, you're completely screwed. It doesn't matter which Olympic team you throw at them. They might not be able to hit as many threes as the more current teams, but they can match up with any of them. If they want to use their size to their advantage, they will have plenty of options to throw at them. They could also use a stifling defensive lineup. You could use Stockton, Jordan, Pippen, Drexler, and Robinson. You have 4 players who are in the top 10 all-time in career steals. Then, the defensive greatness of Pippen and Robinson will cause any team a world of problems. If they need to play small, they could do that as well. They could use Magic, Jordan, Chris Mullin to help spread the floor, Pippen, and any big man you want. That's right, don't question if Magic Johnson could cause an impact on this team. He was only 1 year removed from leading his team to the finals. He then won the All-Star Game MVP in 1992. That wasn't a sympathy vote. He was the best player on the floor. For the Olympics, he showed no signs of rust. He averaged 57% from the field and 46% from the three. It's not like he was recovering from a serious injury. His body was ready to go. At only 32 years old, he proved that he had a lot more to give. Let's not disrespect the greatest point guard in league history. Better yet, let's not disrespect the greatest team we've ever seen. I believe they would beat any team that's ever been assembled. But what about you all? Which team do you think will give them the biggest challenge and why? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.